What if the fingerings printed in your score are actually working against you? If your playing still feels tense no matter how carefully you practice, the fingering rules you were taught might be why. In this video, I'm going to show you a simple 4-step planning process for finding fingerings that work for your hand and help you sound better. And since there are a lot of details to remember about fingering, I put together a free PDF guide for you. You can grab it at the link below, print it out, and keep it on your piano so you have something to help you the next time you have to pick out some fingerings. But first, let's look at why your current approach might be causing you tension. Point 1. The score is a map of how it should sound, not a description of choreography. Many pianists treat the fingerings printed in the score like wisdom received from on high, like they're part of the music itself, and deviating from them is somehow cheating or wrong. And if that's not you, maybe you gone the other way, ignoring the printed fingerings completely and just winging it. The problem there is that you'll end up with all kinds of strange mistakes showing up out of the blue, and at some point you've got notes to play and no fingers left to play them with. They're different problems, but the same cause. You've either got a bad plan or no plan at all. My point of view is that the score is a map of how the music should sound. The phrasing, the articulation, the duration of the notes, that's all there. But the fingering is a suggestion, almost always written by an editor who has different hands and a different brain than you do. Sometimes composers write in their own fingerings, but even then, it doesn't mean that you have to follow them. It means that they found something that worked for their hand. Check out this fingering for Chopin's Mazurka in B-flat minor. One rule that's good to break when necessary is putting your thumb on the black key. I've seen this fingering printed in books. It's much easier to go in and play your thumb on the black key. What you're looking for isn't which rule to follow. It's what does your hand actually need to make the music sound the way it should. And I've pulled all 8 of my fingering concepts for doing exactly that into the free PDF link below. But let me show you the process first, because the PDF will make a lot more sense once you've seen it in action. Point 2, find the hardest part first and then build everything else around it. So now you know that the score isn't telling you exactly which fingers to use, but how do you start figuring out what's going to be the best fingering for you? Most players start at the beginning, which sounds logical, but it causes a specific problem. By the time you reach the hardest moment in the passage, you've already committed to a fingering that gives you no good options there. You spent all your easy choices on the easy notes. The better approach is to find the hardest part first, and it's rarely at the beginning. It might be a leap, big wide interval, a fast run, a long trill, an awkward chord. Whatever it is, that's where you should start. Pick the fingering that makes that moment as easy as possible, and then work outward from there. Sometimes that means accepting a slightly awkward fingering in an easier section just to set yourself up perfectly for the hard one. Trills are a classic example. You want to have your best fingers on the trills. It's worth a small leap to get them there. If I don't do a leap, I end up with fingers on the trill that are really hard. Do a leap, I can get my best trilling fingers onto the trill and it'll sound better and it'll feel easier. I won't have to practice it as much. So once you know where the hardest moment is and you've got your anchor fingering locked in, the passage itself will start giving you more information about everything else. And that's what we're going to look at next. Point 3, let the passage tell you what it needs. So now you found your anchor, but how do you fill in the rest of the fingering? This is where most players still get stuck. They know they should personalize, but they don't know what actually to look for. So they default back to the printed fingering or they guess. And then they end up with one of 3 problems. A fingering that feels fine slowly, but falls apart at tempo. Tension that builds as they play faster, or mistakes, because they're asking their hand and body to do something that's physically impossible. The thing is, the passage itself is giving you information the whole time. You just need to know how to read it. A few things that imply certain fingerings. If there are black keys in the run, you want to put your long fingers on those if possible and put your thumb on the white keys. If a note repeats, you do not need to change fingers. That's a commonly taught rule that you can cheerfully ignore where appropriate. Chopin and Bach both used thumb on the black keys, and Chopin used fingerings that went from 1 to 5 and 5 to 1. So let me show you what some of these look like with actual examples. One rule that's good to break when necessary is putting your thumb on the black key. I've seen this fingering printed in books. It's much easier to go in and play your thumb on the black key. Another rule that's totally fine to break is not switching your fingers on repeated notes. If I change where I play on the key, I don't need to trade fingers to get a musical result. And here's an example where Chopin wrote the fingering to go from 1 to 5. The underlying rule behind all of this is actually very simple. A good fingering never asks your hand to do something it can't do at speed. No opening and closing of the hand where the tempo doesn't allow it. No stretching that builds tension. No crowding the fingers together. If it can't work fast in a fast piece, it's the wrong fingering, period. No matter what it looks like on the page or how much you paid for the sheet music. And that brings us to the final step, which is how do you actually verify that the fingerings are going to work before you commit to them? Point 4, test it at speed in small chunks before you commit yourself. So now you've found the anchor, you've read what the passage is telling you, and you've got a fingering that looks good on paper. And here's where some players make a final mistake. They assume because it'll work slowly that it'll work fast too. So they drill it in at a slow tempo, build it up gradually, only to discover that it breaks down at speed after they've already spent hours ingraining it. And at that point, of course, it's much harder to change. Here's how to avoid this problem. Before you commit to any fingering, take a tiny chunk, 3 or 4 notes around the hardest moment, and try it fast. Not the whole passage, just the critical bit. And here's what that looks like in the Chopin impromptu run. The hardest moment is when you go from 1 to 5. So you could try. If it feels tense, awkward, or your hands simply can't do it at the tempo you need, that's your answer. It's the wrong fingering, no matter how logical it looks. If it flows, you've got what you need. 30 seconds of testing saves hours of relearning. So there it is, a 4-step process for planning any fingering from scratch, built around your hand, being comfortable, and how you want the music to sound. If you want the full system, grab the free PDF at the link below. It lays out all of my 8 fingering concepts in one place. And if you want to go deeper, watch this next. It's 9 fingering mistakes that are making your playing clumsy, and it covers principles that you won't find anywhere else.